Amar Rav Huna on the bottom of Kuf Ayin Dalet Amid Beis. That makes sense? Okay. Thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. And this chus for learning, we should have to make this immediately. For learning, the Nishma Savagol the Basra Daf, the sons of Benzion, and also before Shlema, from David Ben Sarah. You get to Elias Ben Pektipera, another for Shlema, for Chaim Ben Sarah. It's at Jimmy. When did he reach out to? And also for my father, Ben Miriam Abel. Okay. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Shchiv Mira, a person on his deathbed, we had a lot of them in the Baba Basra, that he consecrates all his property to the Beis Hamikdash. And Vamar, and then he says, Mana Pliny Biyadi. Should know that it looked like I had a lot of money. I don't really have a lot of money. Most of that money was not really mine. I owe it to someone. I was holding it for someone. It's not really my money. So Neman, we trust him, and Hektish is not going to get all that money because he said that the money's not wasn't his to be Makdish. We assume that he's not making a trick on Hektish, how to avoid giving the money to Hektish. If it's giving it to Hektish, he would want to give it to Hektish. Not trying to get things out of Hektish. We'd assume that he's not trying to do that. And he actually owes the money. Maskeflor of Nachman, Rav Nachman has a question on Rav Huna. It says like this. You're saying that he's not doing any trick over here. It says, would a person do a trick on his sons? The Rabbi Shmuel Dar Mitabaya. We have a very similar case where children are inheriting a property, and the father says, Rabbi Shmuel mentioned this case, Dar Mitabaya, they both say, Shchimira Shamar, someone on his deathbed that says, Mana Leplani Biyadi, all the money that I have, it's not really mine. I owe it to someone else. So they said that it depends. Amar Tinu, if the father said, give it to him, that other person, then Naisnan, then we trust him that it really belongs to that other person. Amar Tinu, if he didn't finish off to conclude and say, give the money to so-and-so, then ain't Naisnan, then you don't give it. You assume that it actually belongs to the son. Right. Alma, we see from this that other masish lahasbia, that a person doesn't want to make his children look rich. So doesn't want to. Is that how they add in for Ayin Hara? I thought it would be for like Mishalachim and all other people that are trying to sell you stuff.
It says that he does this so that people will not be envious of his children.
Oh, envious. Envious. So that means Ayin Hara.
Yeah.
Concern is Ayin Hara. So he wants to make them not look rich. So he says a lot of the money that I have is not really mine. He's trying to protect his children from Ayin Hara. So maybe Achanami, let's go further. Achanami here also. Maybe when everyone's so impressed that he just said that everything goes to Hektish, maybe he doesn't want to make himself look rich. Doesn't want an Ayin Hara on himself. He says a lot of the things that I just dedicated are not really mine. Why did question is, why did Rav Huna say that we automatically give the money to that person? When it came to his own children, we didn't say that you give the money to that person unless he said give it. But when he just said the money's not mine, the money belongs to someone else, we didn't say give it. We said maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe you didn't want to look look, showy, ostentatious. He just wants to look more modest. So maybe the same thing is by Hektish when he says that money, I owe money to someone. Automatically, you just give it. He didn't even say to give it to him. By his children, you had to say you give it to him. Over here, you don't even have to say you give it. So, Gemara answers this discrepancy between giving money to someone just because someone said so. Kikam Rav Huna Hasam Dinakich Star. You know why Rav Huna, we were trusting him so much and we were giving the money to someone else, even though he didn't say to give it, but he said that he owes it. That's because the other person was coming to collect it. And he said, look, I have a document. And then came along this guy and said, yeah, so some of the money that's in my house is not really mine. Belongs to that person. Michlal. So if that's the way we're going to learn this, that by the case of Rav Huna, where a person was makdish something, and he says that a lot of the money isn't mine, so that's the case is where we give it to him. That's because he has a document. But by Rav and Shmuel, where we don't say that, where we say we don't give it to him unless he says to give it to him, probably doesn't have a document. And what's the case? Amar Tenu Noisnin. But if he says to give it, then we'll give it. Now he doesn't have a document. That's what we've just determined. Because Rav Huna's case had the document, which would mean Rav and Shmuel's case does not have a document because the halacha is different. It must be that contrast. There's no document. Now, if there's no document, but he said to give it, well, the problem is milva al peh. That would be a milva al peh. There's no document. That means it's an oral loan, a verbal agreement, verbal loan. So eina goy v'leiman yarsha v'leiman al kuchas. But how could we say to give it to him? How could we give it to him if he says give it to him? But 1 second, there's the rule by a debt that's in a document you can collect from inheritors and from purchasers. But if there's no document, then you can't collect from inheritors and purchasers. So if he said to give it, why are we giving it? It's only a verbal agreement. You shouldn't be collecting from the inheritors. And here we're talking about to take it from the inheritors, right? Is a shemira. Elamar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, "Idividi dinakit shtara." Could be an answer. You hear what Till is saying? Maybe he didn't die yet, and we're saying to pay it beforehand. You have a note on that? Why then would the orphans be required to pay the creditors, even if their father said give? Rashbam explains that Rabbi Shmuel cannot have meant to say that money must be given to the creditor, something to uphold the deceased. Okay, Rashbam has a question over here. We're saying even if he dies. That's what we mean. That it should be paid even if he dies. Okay. Interesting, because the Rashbam says that it's the Rashbam has another question here. The Rashbam says maybe you have to give maybe you have to pay this up, not because it's a milva peh, but maybe because it's mitzvah l'kayim divrei ames, with the mitzvah to fulfill the wishes of the deceased, and that's why you should. Says if that's the case, then you would only have to give it after they passed away, but after the father passed away, not beforehand. Now, 1 second. So now we're dealing with paying it beforehand. So Hill's question just gets stronger. We're talking about paying it before he passes away, right?
I don't really understand that. It says like either scenario, he gets paid.
That's the way they're explaining the Rashbam. They're explaining, okay. That was probably the halacha, right? Okay. So Elam Rav Nachman or Rachman says we're discussing over here. If a person says that he owes someone money, and that's after he's already either consecrated it, and he's claiming that what he just consecrated was not really all his. Some of it is owed to someone else, or if he's passing away and he says, "Oh, a lot of the money that I have is not really mine." So then over there, when he says a lot of the money that I have is not really mine, we say that it depends if he said give it to that other person or not. Then we'll give it. But by the case of the hektish, we say automatically just give it. So we're trying to make the difference. So we said that the case where by the hektish is where there was someone else that actually had a document that was trying to collect the money. So that's why we say you give it right away. So our problem is that means that the case of Rav and Shmuel, the case of where on his deathbed is when there is no document. They're saying, but without a document, why should they be collecting? So Elam Rav Nachman says, Idi vidi d'nakach. Both cases, there's a document, there's a creditor here that's coming to collect the money. Over here, when he says by the hektish, the document, when he says that they owe that person money, so then that's he himself is validating the document. By the case where the person was passing away and is leaving it for his children, over there the document is not mekoyim, and that it's not a valid document. And Amar Tenu, it's not a notarized document. Amar Tenu, if he says to pay him kaima l'shtara, then that's notarizing. So by the hektish, it was notarized beforehand, and so therefore he can collect immediately. Now, if he says to pay it, now we're dealing with a document that's not notarized. If he says to pay it, that means he's admitting that's good enough, like notarizing it, and then they collect. Layamar to know, but if he doesn't say to pay it, like Kimelishtara, then it's not the document that's considered not notarized, and we can't collect. But both of them have a document. Question is if it's notarized. That's the difference between the two cases. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Shchiv Mirash Amar, let's say someone on his deathbed says, Mana lepleni biyadi. I'm holding on to someone else's money. Amru Yisaimim. The orphans say, yeah, we know about that. Parana, we paid it already. We paid him. So then the din is, Namanim, we trust them. We trust them that they paid it already. Let's say he said differently, not some of the money that I have is that person's. Rather, he gave instructions. He said, Tinu mana leplain, give $100 to so-and-so. V'amr Yisaimim, and the orphans say, Parano, say we paid it. Einam manim, we don't trust them. The Gemara asks right away, it says, Klapi laya, this should be exactly the opposite. If he said to give it, then there's more of a reason to assume that they gave it. Because we were saying before that Omar Tenu, if he says give it to him, then we say that we actually collect. If it loy Omar Tenu, then they don't collect. So why should they pay something that they don't have an obligation to pay and not pay something that they do have the obligation to pay? The difference between if he said give it or not. So Klapilaya means the logic should be exactly the opposite. Klapilaya is where's it facing? Like which way is this headed? You're headed backwards. The logic should be the opposite. Amar Tenu Mana, if he says to give the $100, even the Paskevul and since the father was explicit to say that you should give it, we could say that maybe they actually gave it because he spelled it out. Mana lepleni biyadi, if he just says I'm holding on to someone else's money, given the Paskevul the father wasn't explicit with instructions, will say maybe that they didn't pay it. Why did we say that we trust them when the father didn't say to pay it? Rather, if this is a correct statement from Rabbo, it would have to be stated as follows. If someone on his deathbed says, Mana lepleni biyadi, I have $100 from someone else in my possession. Amr Yisaimim. And the orphans say, Chazar va'amar lanu abba parati. Our father retracted and he said that I already paid that $100. Now manim they're trusted. My timer. What's the reason? Kuri Midkar, he remembered. He remembered that he borrowed, and he remembered that he paid it back. Let's say he didn't say it I'm holding on to someone's money. Let's say he didn't say it like that. Let's say he said it with instructions. Tenu manalaplaini. He instructed them to give $100. V'amr Yisaimim, and the orphan said, Chazer v'amar abba parati. Our father said that he paid the money. Then ain't neman, and then we don't trust him. Demisa de pare, because if he actually had paid it, he never would have said, give it. I guess what the Gemara is saying is that if he was not sure, if he wasn't sure about it, he just would have mentioned it, but not with instructions. The fact that he added in instructions means that he was sure that it was not paid. And then we can't trust him to say that it was yes paid. Right? If the father was like questioning his memory, he would have said, I think I have some money that doesn't belong to me. He wouldn't have said, go pay it. The fact that he said, go pay it means that he was sure that he did owe it. And then we don't trust him to say that now he doesn't owe it.
I was thinking, person thinking out loud.
Right.
And when he said the commands to the kids, like give or take, that's when he actually meant.
Right. Right. Boy, Rava has a question. Someone on his deathbed that admits to someone that's claiming that he owes him money. He said the guy's there visiting him. What a nice guy. Visiting him when he's sick. And he's telling him, by the way, you owe me money. Okay. So, and the person says, yes. Right? So, right. So, Tzarech Laimar, this is in question. Should the person, do they need to say, Atem Eidai? Does the creditor need to say, you two fellas that are watching here, you're my witnesses? Or does he not need to say, you're my witnesses? See, sometimes if a person comes over to someone on the street and starts yelling, you owe me money, this and that, he says, yeah, you're right, I'll pay you. So afterwards, they say, you told me you agree. He says, yeah, I was lying, you were bothering me, so I lied. But you can't bring me to court because of that. You're trying to get you off the, I was in a rush. So, but if you say, Atamedai, you're my witnesses during that, then you're in trouble. You can't say, yeah, I'll pay you in front of witnesses. That's a different story.
Say, like, swear to me that
yeah, but that swear out of court would be different. But you can administer an oath. It would be considered an oath.
what you're saying has to be.
But I think that's done in court. But here you would say, you're my witnesses. So when someone's on his deathbed, do we say that the same concept of saying, you're my witnesses is necessary? Or we would say, no, a person on his deathbed wouldn't be lying. That's the question. Or it's going to say, sign here, write it down. Or does he not have to say, write it down? The question now is, the Gemara spells it out, does a person, Mishata means like trick.
It says jest.
Yeah,
Jest. Does a person jest?
It's kidding.
yeah.
On his deathbed or not? Can we take this as serious? The boss of the boy had the pasta. After Rava asked this question, he answered, "Eina the mishata b'shas misa." Person would not jest on his deathbed with and whatever he says goes. It's as if it's already been handed over. He doesn't have to say write it down. He doesn't have to say you are my witnesses. It's already considered transferred.
It seemed like it would seem like they might be targeting people for somebody's not feel well because they're vulnerable. I don't know if this is the halacha of the Maisa look according to Mark, maybe look this way. What if somebody has a lot of wealth, but they don't have anyone around them to protect them from dubious debt collectors that are just showing up?
Cousin from there, cousin from
The
there.
problem here is that who's going to tell the Besdin if there's no witnesses? Who's going to tell the Besdin that the guy admitted? There would have to be witnesses there. The question is, I think even if you have witnesses there, you still have to say atamedai that you are witnesses to this conversation. Make it more serious. Now we're saying that you don't have to say atamedai, but there would be other people there to verify this. Otherwise, the inheritors are going to come and say, I don't know what you're talking about. My father never told me anything about this. Right.
He's like, about to pass, and then he has to worry about like saying, "Oh, you guys are my witnesses." Now, whatever he says doesn't count.
Right. It's a leniency for him so that he shouldn't lose his mind, saying that I'm not going to be able to get my affairs in order. Okay. Here's is this the last Mishnah of the chapter?
Yes, it's the last.
Of the Masech. Wow. Amal v'eschaver b'shtar. Someone lends his friend money with a document. Should have been the beginning of the
This one.
of the Masechta. There's a lot of Masechtas that I would have switched a lot of things around in the order.
Especially this.
Just for educational, to start with something more
Easy.
elementary and build your way up, The order of the Masechta itself was done by Rabbi. Not the order of Masechtais, but the order of each Maseches. In each self-contained Maseches, that was done in order. That was done with the specific order. So, Hamal v'Schaver b'shtar.
Why didn't they do it your way then?
I don't know.
No. Logical way.
I don't know. Each one has an explanation. Each Masechta.
They say that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, for example, Gittin starts off not with how to write a get and when they're allowed to get divorced. It doesn't start off like with that, when he can complain about her, she can complain. It doesn't start. It starts off with two witnesses that come. Someone bringing a get from a faraway country has to say that I was there at the writing of it, which is, it doesn't even tell. There's so many halachas you need to know before mentioning that. So I think the Chassam Sofer over there says, no, we wanted to start with something positive. And when would a divorce be positive? If the guy is not even here, he's in a faraway country and his wife needs a get, that would be the positive case of divorce. So so I think there's explanations for this. But anyway, this seems like a elementary Mishnah, right here at the end. Malvas Chaver b'shtar, someone that lends his friend money with a document, but whether the document contains in it that there's a lien on his property, on the debtor's property. Whether it says that or not, we assume that it's there, that it's meant to be there, and we say achrayas ta seifa. The fact that it's not in there, that's just a mistake of the scribe, but it was meant to be there. And so goyvim and achasim mishabadim, you can collect from property that has a lien, that knows all of the debtor's property has a lien on it. Whether he sells it off or not, you can collect that property. Whether he doesn't sell it off or sells it off, you can collect from the new purchasers. Al Yedei Edim, let's say he lent money not with the document but just with witnesses, then Goyvin Menachasim Menechayin, you can only collect from the property that the debtor has at hand when it comes to collection time. Let's say the promissory note was written by the borrower, but there's no witnesses on it. But that's good enough to collect. He says, I owe you, right? That's a regular promissory note. I owe you money. So you can use it to collect. The only thing is, because you don't have witnesses, you can't go to property that's been sold off by the debtor, because in order to create a lien, in order to be able to confiscate property that's been sold, you need two things in place. One is that it was written in a document, the loan was written in a document. The second thing is that you need to have two witnesses that would spread the word around that this person has a loan and therefore his property is mortgaged. Because how would a purchaser know to avoid that buying that property if no one knows about his debt? The only way to protect the purchaser would be, the only way that the purchaser should know not to buy a property from this person because he has a lot of debts on him, the title is not clear, would be if there would be a way of finding out, because people know about it. But if there's no document, just an IOU, there's no witnesses, then how would the purchaser know to avoid buying that? Let's say there's a document that says someone owes someone else money, and then the witnesses sign, and then on the bottom, P.S., it says so-and-so is a guarantor for this loan. So, if you want to collect from the Arev, you can only collect from the guarantor only from property that he has at hand. You can't say that there's a lien on his property and property that he sold still contains that lien and you can go confiscate, repossess that property. You can't do that. Why? Because since it's been written in a document after the witnesses, it's not considered a document with witnesses that creates the lien on the property, even though it's sold.
There's still an issue because adding to the document.
Oh, take a look. My Sabal of Rabbi Shmuel. Story came to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel Paskin that he collect from the Arev, from regular property, not property that's been sold already. Amalei bananas, right? This is one of those friends. Yeah. Banana says, you can't collect it all because it's after the signatures. Amrlai, Lama always says, why not? Amrlai, because it's like this. He says, if someone is strangling someone else in the marketplace, his friend comes, Ramalai, he says, leave him alone. I'll pay him. I'll pay you. So Potter, he actually doesn't have to pay. Because he didn't lend him in order to create that lien, that the person is really indebted. It's because he said, well, when I lent the money, you told me that you were going to pay. I only lent it because you said, but here he lent the money before. He didn't lend it because I said that I'm going to co-sign, right? Listen. When would someone be obligated as an Arev? And like we said before, that what creates the obligation of the Arev is the fact that the other person is lending money because he trusts him. That benefit, that flattering that he's getting, the pride that he's getting, that, oh my gosh, people are lending money just because of me, because they trust me. So that is what's creating the debt on him. That's what he's receiving in order for him to offer up the lien. When would it be chayav? He said, chayav. He says, lend him and I will pay. That's when he's chayav. Because the reason why he lent it was because he's a trusted person. Rabbi Shmuel says, someone wants to get smart. He doesn't say eat gefilte fish. He says, Yasik b'dini maminis. He should study the dini maminis, which is the laws of, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra, these halachas. What's that, Aleph? Gadol mehem. There's no area of the Torah that's greater than them. They're like a wellspring that's always giving forth more and more wisdom. If someone wants to be involved in these halachas, wants to learn these halachas, Yishamish is Shimon ben Nanas. You should serve Shimon ben Nanas and hear his teachings. Go to his yeshiva, because he understands it, and that's the concluding Mishnah. It's interesting that we end off with Shimon ben Nanas being the Amar Ula. Ula says, according to the Torah, echad malva b'shtar, v'echad milva b'shtar, echad milva b'shtar, v'echad milva al peh. Whether the loan is in a document, whether it's a verbal agreement, you should be able to collect from property. There's a lien on the person's property no matter what, whether it's in a document, whether it's not in a document. So my time, what's the reason why there's a lien on the property? Shibuda Dairaisa, because the lien has a biblical source. It comes from the Torah. What's the biblical source? The Rashbam says that the person takes out the when they come to collect, the borrower takes out the mashkin, the collateral. He takes it outside. He brings it out to him, and somehow that tells me that there's a lien on this property. So why do we say in the Mishnah that if it's a verbal agreement, then you can't collect from property that's been sold? If there's a lien on the property, then when the person sold it, the lien is still there. Why can't you collect from that? My answer is because the purchaser would not be able to know that there was a lien on that property, and we don't want the purchaser to lose out. So we said you can only collect from property that the person has at hand, not from a purchaser. Witnesses. Yeah, even with witnesses, you need both. You need a document and witnesses. Right. Right. Yeah, you're asking that if there's witnesses there, then even without a document, then they can still spread the word. I think they would only write it down when there's like an event of a document.
That's what I understood from here. They collect it either way, whether it's written or not written. But if it's not written, how are people going to know about the scheme? No
right.
witness.
No, if there are witnesses, yeah. If there are witnesses, but there's no document, then we still don't say that the people know about it. Yeah. It's sort of like when there's a Hatzalah call. So everyone likes to talk, oh, what happened? You saw the Hatzalah. But if they didn't come in the truck with the sirens, then people don't talk about it. Yeah, I saw someone going in there with the bag. The truck, it's all the lights. Anyway, it's got to be in the document for people to really say that there was an event. Okay. What about if there's a document? Why do we have to pay? Maybe the Lakuchas doesn't know about it. He says, they should have done more research. If they would have done their homework, they would have found out that that person has some debts. You don't want to buy property from him until those are paid up. You don't know if the title is clear. Okay. That was the opinion of Ula, who says, Shibuda de Raisa, that really there's a lien on all the debtor's property, whenever there's any debt. The only thing is we took it off to satisfy one other concern. Rabba says exactly the opposite. By Torah, according to the Torah, there's never any lien on the property. You collect the money, but that's just the money that he has on hand. My time, what's the reason? This whole concept of the lien going on the person, the lien goes on the person. The person has an obligation. Not all his property is now subjugated to pay this up, right? The person has to pay it up. It goes on his passport. It doesn't go on his bank statements, right? He has the obligation, not everything that he owns. Why do we say that you can collect from the property even though it's been transferred to someone else, been sold? Because we want people to lend money. And if someone is just going to say, what do they do before they go bankrupt? They pass they pass all their possessions over to other people, and then they declare bankruptcy. People are going to always be concerned that they're going to get rid of their properties, and they're not going to be able to collect if there's no lien on properties that they're getting rid of. So we want them to be able to collect, and we want them to be able to lend and be secure that they're going to get it back. So that was an institution that was instituted, not because it's biblical, there's a biblical lien. No, it was an institution of the sages, so that people should lend. So why didn't they do this with a milval peh? He says, Hasam Lasleikola, over there, a milval peh doesn't have the same rumors that would allow a person to know not to purchase. So to also basically to protect the purchaser. The Gemara now says, did Rabba really say this, that there's no lien on property? Rabba said, this is going back to the chapter about inheritance. It says, Gavu karka yeshlai. This is talking about a firstborn son. If the father was owed money, they went ahead and collected property for that debt, the inheritors. When they collect property, so that's the father's property. Someone owed the father money. So now when it comes to the inheritance, they should divide it according to the laws of the inheritance, which means the firstborn son gets a double portion. But that's if they collected property. Gavumayis, but if they collected money, then ainlay, then he doesn't get the double portion because the firstborn doesn't get potential money. He only gets actual money. Remember that? There's a difference in potential money, money that's coming to the father, but the father didn't actually own. He only gets a single portion. Firstborn gets a double portion only from money that he had on hand. So now, if it's collecting property, that meant that that property, even though it was in the hands of the debtor, but the lien of the creditor was on it. So therefore, it's considered in the possession of the creditor. So the firstborn son should be able to get the double portion off that because it was considered in his hands, even when the father was, even when the father passed away, it was considered there already because that property existed and there was a lien from the creditor onto that property. So that's why the firstborn son can get it. Now the problem is that how would you ever say this if you hold that there's no such thing as a lien on a biblical level? It was just instituted by the sages. Maybe what we can say is, apich. We're going to turn the opinions around. The Rabba le'ula, ula le'Rabba. We'll say that what Ula said is really Rabba's statement, but Rabba said is really Ula's statement. Just 1 second. But Ula said, that a creditor, according to the Torah, is supposed to get ziburis, is supposed to get the lowest type of property. Now, we're saying that there's a lien on that property, even on a biblical level. But we're saying that, yeah, they don't get the best property, but they do get paid with property, which means that there is a lien on the property according to the Torah. So you can't switch Rabba and Ula, because Ula clearly says that on a biblical level, there's a lien on the property. The Gemara answers, Rabba time of the Bnei Marava kamar v'leile spirale. Rabba was just explaining what the Bnei Marava said back in Perek Yesh Neichlin, 40 pages ago or something, 30 pages ago, that they had made this statement about the firstborn getting a double portion, and he explained that that's only when he collects property, not when they collect from the regular thing. But he actually himself doesn't hold of that. He was just explaining what the Bnei Marava, what they held in Eretz Yisrael, which he argues with. By the way, Ula would be reporting the opinion of Eretz Yisrael often.
Question: is there any practical difference to these two opinions as to whether the lien is derisa and the Rabbanim made this takana to exempt metaltalin, or there's no derisa and the Rabbanim just instituted a lien on property?
That's a very good question. I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there is. I'd have to look that up. Yeah. It's a very good question. He's asking, there's a machlokes here, if this is a biblical lien or if this is just the sage's enactment to support someone that's lending money. They said, would there be enough nafkamina? Would there be a practical difference in some scenario where we would have to say, well, we hold like this, and therefore, Okay. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel Dami Tavayo, Rabbi and Shmuel both say, Milval Peh, when it comes to an oral, verbal agreement, they don't collect not from inheritors, and not from purchasers. In other words, there's no lien on the property. My timer, what's the reason? Because the lien that's on the property is not from a biblical level. So that was the first opinion. What we just said was the opinion of Bavel, Rav and Shmuel. Now we go to Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish of Eretz Yisrael. You can collect from inheritors and from purchasers. My time a shibuda deraisa, because there is a shibuda deraisa. How could they say that you collect from lekuchas by a milval peh? The Mishnah says that you don't. How do they reconcile their statement with the Mishnah?
Something about the Ramon.
Meisvei, the Gemara has a question on this. I don't know the answer to that. Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish are discussing law on a biblical level. They certainly agree, though, with the ruling of our Mishnah that in practice, oral loans cannot be collected from properties that have since been sold to buyers. For as explained in the Gemara, the rabbi suspended the lien in the case of oral loans in order to protect buyers. Okay, so basically, they're not saying on a practical level; they're saying on a biblical level. That's what it should have been, but the rabbis changed. Okay. Okay. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. If someone is digging a pit in a public area, you shouldn't be doing that. And V'nafal olav shar, an ox was walking along and falls right on him, and it kills the guy, the digger. Yarshe balabar chayavon l'shalim. I skipped the line. I'm so sorry. Pater, he's exempt. The owner of the ox is exempt from paying for the murder of this. That's not considered murder. The death, manslaughter. This person that was in the pit. But not only that if the ox dies, they have to pay, the inheritors of the person, they have to pay the value of the ox that died in the pit. So the ox killed the father, and then they have to even pay him for that, for the death of the ox. Well, why would they have to pay that loan?
Go buy like the worst.
Is like a milval peh. That it's not a loan; it's a debt that they have to pay for that. But how can you collect from inheritors? I thought we just said that debts that don't have a document aren't collected from inheritors, according to Rab and Shmuel. And here we're saying that you have to pay the owner of the ox for what you owe him for what the father owes him, really. Yeah. Amar Rabbi Lai, Amar Rav. So Rabbi Lai says the name of Rav, that case, but the question was on Rav. Rav explained it. We're talking about not that the person was dead on the bottom of the pit, and now the inheritors have to pay a debt that was accrued by the father. No, the father made it to court, and I'm sorry, it's late. The father made it to court, and if it's in court, it's considered like a document. Umar says, "Well, Harguk, what are you saying that he made it to court? It says he died." Amar Ravad Barava says, "Shasu Treifa." He subsequently died. Now he made it to court. When whatever the court says is like in a document. Amar Rav Nachman says, Tana, the Brisa says, Meis V'Kavrei, that he died in the pit and then he was buried there. It says, yeah, the Besdin came to the top of the pit, and they paskin on the top of the pit. That's considered like a document, and that's why you could collect. And we'll leave it here. Okay. Have a good day.